Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers here with my good friend from Canada, Tanner Hnidey.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Welcome.
Well, I'll tell you, a month. It seems more like a year than a month.
I know, I agree. And well, granted, the month has flown by, but still, it's been
Hey,
far too
hey,
long
hey,
since
hey,
we've chatted
Tanner,
last.
we're getting feedback from your
How about this?
uh, testing 1, 2.
Sound any better?
Sounds a lot better, yeah.
Nice. There we go.
Okay. No, I think we're still having the feedback.
What if I came out and came back in?
Why don't you do that? Meanwhile, I'll stay with the audience. Folks, stand by. We're trying some new stuff here. Just stand by, Tanner. Testing. Okay, Tanner, stand by. I think we have it. Tanner, how are we?
Let's try this. How does that sound? Is that any better?
Well, it's probably better because I think the problem was me.
Oh,
when you disappeared, I'm figuring out he's gone. So how could there be some feedback? Well, folks, there you go. A little bit tired, I guess.
that makes it. Oh no, that's okay. Anyways, welcome back.
Poor Tanner. All right, so Tanner, we'll get right to it. A lot's been going on in your country and in the United States. I'm carefully watching our numbers, and I believe that some of our broadcasting into your country has been banned or blocked to some degree. I think, I'm not sure, but I'm just looking at these numbers here on Facebook and numbers here on Rumble, and there's a pretty wide gap here. But we'll see. We'll see where we go with this. In the meantime, folks, I said all along, Tanner, for quite some time that if people have patience, they're going to see some results. If they work within the framework of the law, they're going to see some results. And people, not only here in America and in Canada, but around the world, they're losing patience when they see people go to prison unjustly, when they see people charged with crimes by the government unjustly. But here in the United States, we've had a number of victories and continue to have a number of victories in the courts. And now you in Canada could celebrate some victories, correct?
Yes, and particularly in Alberta, but also across the country. The honest truth is that at least here in Alberta, the new court victories with Pastor Coates and Pastor Stevens and so on, they come not almost, they come on a technicality. But at this, a win is a win. And so we're so encouraged to hear that, again, Pastor Coates and Pastor Stevens and Chris Scott, et cetera, their charges have been dropped. The crown is withdrawn, and those men are no longer being charged with anything. So, of course, they shouldn't have been charged to begin with. It was a shame and it's a disgrace that they were charged at all. But at any rate, the light of justice is beginning to shine through that dark period of time over the last 3 years.
And let me add this too, and I'd like you to comment on this. The battle, folks. Now, I'm in politics. I'm not a preacher. I'm not an evangelist. I'm a political leader here in the United States. But I've learned that the battle that we are fighting is not only a political battle, but it's a spiritual battle. So, Tanner, I've said all along to people here in the United States in our travels, it's good. Go to rallies, do it peacefully, work to increase public awareness, but let God know also what's on one's heart. So the battle is also on the knees before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree with you. I often say that a widow on her knees in prayer can bring down an empire. A widow on her knees with the window open and she's praying to the Almighty King could defeat even the mightiest armies in the world. And that's true for anyone who prays to Christ. And so you're quite correct. This is a spiritual battle. It starts with the spiritual, and that manifests in the physical. So, if the nation, for that matter, whether America or Canada or any other nation in the world, if it refuses to repent and return to Christ, then all of this is in vain. The return to Christ and to Christian values and to the Ten Commandments and the rule of law and the supremacy of God and so on has to be first. And then from that, all other things which are good follow.
Tyrants are not going to be on their knees, folks, praying to the King of Kings. They're going to be opposing him. But God, I know why you're laughing, but God's going to bring them to their knees, right? because that scripture says every knee shall bow and tongue confess, even the tyrants, that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Yes, that's what's so encouraging about this entire thing. The battle is heavy, the battle is hard. And like you mentioned at the start, it takes patience. It's a slow grind day by day, but we have a magnificent hope because we know how the story ends. We know that Christ is already victorious. He's already sitting beside the Father in the throne room in heaven above. And so we have no fear. We can march forward with the utmost confidence, knowing that Christ goes before us and he's already vanquished our enemies and his enemies.
Now, folks, especially those in Canada, I'm going to share something with you that I've said for quite some time. And the first, let's say, step towards what we seek to achieve through what we're doing on this broadcast and what we're doing with the SOS campaign, I'll give you an update on that in a minute, is to get to the media, so that the rest of America, if not the world, is going to learn what's going on in Canada. And I shared with Tanner before we went on the air last night, here in the United States, one of the first and most largest radio broadcast networks. The host actually replaced Larry King. Tanner, what do you think of that? 300 stations, over 5 million people called me, folks. The host of this broadcast called me and invited me on to speak about what? To speak about Canada. So that is the first of many, many news outlets that we're going to be going on across the country. And our target date was September to start this. Well, maybe, as we said earlier, the good Lord had some other plans, and we started it a few days early. But that's a victory. It's a victory through prayer. It's a victory through perseverance. It's a victory through the nearly 50,000 now SOS letters we have. That is a victory. Now, about those letters, Tanner, your Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly.
Yes, that's how you say her name.
Thank her. Folks, if any of you in Canada see her on Parliament Hill, just give her a big hug and kiss from Lieutenant Rogers from Nutley, New Jersey. And I'll tell you why. She gave us a gift. And you know, there's what's that saying, Tanner? If you give somebody enough rope, they'll hang themselves. Well, you give somebody a big mouth, they're going to talk themselves into trouble. So here's what she did, folks. Here's what she did. Now, remember, all along, I've been saying that Canada is becoming a national security threat to the United States of America. Not the Canadian people. I'm talking about Trudeau and his government. Well, of course, you know, I mean, the hate mail, the terrible things that people were sending to me from Canada. I don't know what I'm talking about. And stay out of our business, Yankees, stay in your country. I haven't been called a Yankee since the Civil War, and I wasn't even around. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, here's what she did, folks. Listen to this. And this proves my point. And I'll tell you why it's a gift and how what she said is going to help us. She said that in an interview that Canada is working on a game plan for the outcome of America's upcoming presidential election. A direct assault, one, on our presidential election, and two, on conservatives in the United States of America. Now, Tanner, if this isn't election interference, I mean, what in the world is?
Oh, sure. You know, there's a good quote from Hamlet. It's quite popular. The quote is, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." It's humorous almost in a sense that Jolly would say such a thing, because it's like, turn around and look in the mirror. Her liberal government is the one that locked us out of our bank accounts. Her liberal government is the one that authorized horses to trample on innocent bystanders at a peaceful protest. Her government is the one that locked the entire Capitol down. Her government is the one that declared, again, peaceful protesters who were demanding their rights and freedoms be returned to them as they ought to do were practically domestic terrorists. They've done all of these things, and yet she and others in the liberal cabinet have the audacity to comment on the American elections. It's nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense. But it's so typical of a fox, of any sort of sly and sneaky animal. It's a distraction. It's something that says we're not the problem. Our foreign allies are, or probably be, and so you shouldn't be blaming us so much. It's so typical of the liberal government to do something like that.
So here's how this gift works out for us, folks. That proves, no doubt, that the Canadian government now, out of the mouth of their own foreign affairs minister, is working on a game plan to do what? to us. You see, she was asked by a reporter during this interview, what is the game plan? Well, we're working on it. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, folks, but I like to put two and two together. I like to connect dots. And Tanner, I wonder if the game plan has already been executed, beginning with Bill C-11, beginning with the censoring and the banning of broadcasts, beginning with the Canadian government going after Fox News at the bequest of special interest groups, okay, in their words, because they don't like what Fox News is broadcasting. If that isn't censorship, folks, by the government, if that isn't the government trying to control what you're going to hear and see in Canada through the airwaves, then nothing is. But she's the one that used the word game plan. So, Tanner, I'm just trying to think, could it already have been executed with the beginning of broadcasting, and then the freedom of religion issues where pastors are being arrested? Am I maybe kind of going a little bit too far, maybe thinking too much, or what do you think?
Oh, no, I don't think so. You read the scriptures. I have no doubt that Trudeau and his cronies, his cabinet ministers, serve a one world government, a one world order. Again, that used to sound like conspiracy 5 years ago. It's not. You look at what they're doing right now, you look at their objectives, their ideals, and it's clear and present that they seek to usher in the one world government that's been prophesied in Revelation. And so all that they're doing, in part, is to destroy. Here's a good example. They're trying so hard to destroy borders, to destroy any notion of property, so that instead of states and countries, we have one super state and one super country, one massive global country, one massive global massive land that they can therefore institute and control. Now, of course, they're not doing so on their own. You look at the actions of the president in France. You look at the mess that Germany's in right now. You look at other European nations across that continent. You look at what's happening across the entire world, and you see just how corrupted and ravenous these leaders are, and how willing they are to do anything and everything to serve Antichrist. That's not conspiracy. I think a man who can't see it needs to open his eyes and it's like, wake up and smell not the roses, because it's not a sweet smell, right? It's something putrid, it's something hideous, it's something awful, it's something directly opposed to Jesus Christ. So when you ask the question, might this be something which is already put in place? Oh, it wouldn't surprise me for a moment if it was. Wouldn't surprise me for one moment.
May 5th, 2023. Canadian regulators. Imagine, I wonder who these regulators are. Maybe Trudeau and his cronies sitting around a table that are going to figure out what the Canadian people are allowed to see and hear. But anyway, May 5th, 2023, Canadian regulators have launched a public consultation on calls to ban Fox News from cable packages after receiving complaints saying the network has aired hateful content about LGBTQ2S plus people. Folks, I got to tell you something. I can't imagine thousands and thousands of Canadians calling Trudeau's office complaining about Fox News. And look, I don't like what a lot of people say on television. Listen, I disagree 99.9% of the time what CNN is airing. But I thank the good Lord we have a constitution that protects the rights of people who I am opposed to express their views. Leave it up to me. Leave it up to the Canadian people, the American people, to decide what they choose to see on TV, live stream, etc., not the government. And so, Tanner, I see once again the Trudeau government looking to make a move to control the lives of their citizens. And this is something I think the citizens in America need to know, because think about this, folks. Trudeau's getting away with it up there. Maybe the people are really starting to respond. He's tried it here, not Trudeau. Here, Biden has tried it, but Biden has failed. In fact, Biden doesn't even know if he tried it last week or he's going to try it next week. So Tanner, we got to laugh a little, right, Tanner? Because these clowns in the Parliament and in the Congress and in the White House, I mean, I'll tell you, if we don't laugh, we're going to go. They're going to send us to the loony bin. But
yes.
But so you see the pattern, right? I'm trying to draw here. Control.
Yep, absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely correct. It wasn't thousands of Canadians who phoned in to the CRTC or to our national regulators. It's a small interest group that's well organized, and as it always is, they're very vocal, and so they they're like a man that roars loudly to try and scare off a bear. They make themselves seem bigger than they actually are. But their worldview, their belief system is so fragile, it's so brittle that it can't handle even Fox News being shown on television. It's so fragile and it's so opposite of reality that something like Fox News, a channel which you can simply turn off of your television, is too grave and serious a threat for them to countenance. That's how weak they are. That's how weak they are. People think that, strong men are dangerous men. It's not, well, it's true in a sense, but not really. It's actually weak men are the dangerous men. Those men who can't even handle a TV channel are the really dangerous ones, because again, they will stop at nothing to, like you mentioned, censor us for the purposes of control. And so it's utter nonsense what they're trying to do. I'm glad that you brought up, just the state of Canada right now to your American counterparts and friends, because people need to understand across the world just how dictatorial Canada is, just how dictatorial our government is. I think these new internet censorship bills are working exactly as Trudeau designed, insofar as people aren't reading as much news as they were before from independent outlet medias, here in Alberta, like Western Standard or True North or Rebel News, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's easier for Trudeau to escape with his corruption. It's nonsense. It's dangerous. And if we do nothing, the consequences are dire. History shows that. You look at Christ. It's like the very first thing they tried to do, and they tried to do throughout his ministry, is silence him. And then when that didn't work, everyone knows what came next.
A citizen in New Brunswick, Canada, actually made a comment on this, the Canadian regulators and what they're trying to do. And this is what the person said. As a person who identifies as LGBTQ2SI, you got the whole alphabet coming up, folks, pretty soon. I don't know what's going on here, but it's a big organization, I guess, really. We get it, and look, I respect everybody. Live the way you want, but the government doesn't belong in anybody's business. But anyway, as a person who identifies with the LGBTQ2SI community, I firmly believe Canadians are able to decide for themselves which cable channels they want or don't want, and Canadians are able to discern opinion from reality without options being removed on their behalf. That's from a resident of New Brunswick, Canada. Now, look, folks, I've been around the country. I've spoken to what we call log cabin Republicans. They're from the gay community, wonderful people. They believe in conservative values. We do disagree on a lot of policy issues. We do that on a lot of issues that I consider close to my heart because of my faith in Christ, etc. It doesn't make these people evil. It doesn't make them any better or worse than me. All of us fall short, right, Tanner? All of us fall short the glory of God. It doesn't mean that I support a lot of the positions they hold politically, but what I do support is their right, at least in this country, their right to express their views the way they feel it. And it is not the government's right to take those views away. It is not the government right to tell you and I that we can't speak out against those things, or they can't speak out against us. My point is this, folks: live and let live. You can decide. This person here is in the gay community, specifically stating, why is the government getting involved in something like this? So Tanner, I think that the key here is we go back here to the Constitution of the United States. We the people. It didn't distinguish what people, secular people, religious people, etc. We the people. When it comes to separation of church and state, we have that in the Constitution, but it doesn't mean separation of God and man. So
right.
So
that's the point. Yes, that's precisely correct. If government won't be ruled by the supremacy of the Almighty God, then it'll be ruled by some different supremacy. It might be ruled by the Church of Marx, where communism is the religion. It might be ruled by a church of atheism, where there are no pastors, only thinkers or quote unquote thinkers. It can be ruled by any number of churches, but it will be ruled by some church. It will be governed by some set of laws and values. And so the question is, which you rightfully raise, is what church must it be governed by? Your forefathers knew it when they wrote the Constitution, and when they gained their independence, they knew what it was. According to our documents, supposedly our government knows what it is. They don't anymore, or they've neglected it. But even our Constitution recognizes the supremacy of the Almighty God. And so that's the question that the nation has to answer. What set of rules will the government be ruled by? And the answer is quite clear. It has to be the scripture. It must be the Ten Commandments, precisely because Christ was raised from the dead.
And there was one king back then, the same
Yes,
king we have today. That's Jesus Christ.
absolutely.
It's as
Absolutely.
simple as that. If you
Yep.
choose to believe it, thank God. If you don't choose to believe it, we just continue to pray for you. We don't condemn you. We don't look at you any different. And so, getting back to the point of speaking to the Log Cabin Republicans, which is gay Republican organizations in Texas, uh, I was really wondering why they asked me to come to speak. And their answer was because we know you won't spew out hate. Now, that to me was a message to me about this, Tanner, and I'd like you to weigh in on this. We could really be a strong advocate of what we believe in, and more so a witness to Christ by using wisdom as we approach these issues, by not becoming the hate-filled people that are attacking us, but by being firm in our beliefs, but at the same time, maybe with a soft glove, if you get what I'm trying to say,
Mm.
where we don't. It's like the abortion issue. I've had so many people say to me, "Gee, I'm totally opposed to abortion. Okay, I'm totally opposed to it. Okay, but I've spoken to so many women who have had abortions and are really regretful of that." And I've been asked to speak at certain organizations to let those women know that they're not murderers, that they're not killers that are going to be condemned to hell. So what I talk to them about is, well, here's what you got to do. You've got to pray. You've got to come to Christ. You've got to talk to him. Let him speak to your heart. And then he will clearly let you know an answer to the questions you have. I can't. I don't know what the answer is, because at the last minute, somebody could come to Christ and their lives could just turn inside out and upside down for the better. But my point is, there's so much hate going on around. Sometimes we could be firm, but at the same time, we've got to let people know that we're not here to condemn you. I'm not here to judge you. He does the judging.
When we speak as Christians, we have to remember that we have the magnificent hope of Christ. There's no need, there's no reason, there isn't any proper justification for the Christian to be a cynic. Not when Christ has been raised from the dead. We go around, even as difficult as things might seem, and you look at the tragedy of so many people's lives, of they live in shame, or they live in sadness, or they live in distraught, they live in all of these ways. And yet, as Christians, precisely because Christ has been raised from the dead, and therefore we know that as Christians, Christ has conquered death, and therefore death is conquered in us, and walk around with a magnificent skip in our step, a hope, a smile. We can attend these rallies with a youthful optimism, knowing that, again, Christ has already won the victory. Christ has already been raised from the dead. He's already won the victory at the cross. And so, like you mentioned, there is no need to go around with our head down low, a growl in our voice, and spewing cynicism. It should be precisely the opposite. The things are exciting. It's encouraging to see Christ is coming back. And so, like you mentioned, we can have a smile when we attend these things.
And so it gets even more interesting with the Canadian government. By the way, I hope and I believe that some of the Canadian Parliament, if they're not watching this broadcast, we do know some of their staffers are. That we know. We got that from somebody up in your country, monitoring us. Imagine, we're being monitored. We're nervous. We're being monitored by the tyrant up there in Parliament Hill, and the tyrant, by the way, in the White House here. So maybe they're watching us together. Who knows, right? Who knows?
They might.
Yeah. Although Joe Biden has to turn to Trudeau and ask him, well, what are we watching? Who are these two guys?
Yes.
And Trudeau would say, well, no, we're not watching anything other than that really is prohibited on TV worldwide.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so Canada now has, and this, by the way, is taken off here in America, and the American people are not happy about this, especially, folks, those who belong to the gay community are not happy. We've heard from some of them. Canada, citing the risk of potential dangers, is advising the LGBTQ travelers planning trips to the United States to check how they might be affected by recently passed laws in some states. So, of course, as I asked later, what laws? What laws? And some of the people in the gay community who know us and support us have been in touch with us, and they actually want to come on, and we might get them on at some point, Tanner, to respond to this, because they feel, at least the ones that have spoken to us, they feel that they've made great advances here. They also told me, and I was a little surprised to hear this from them, that the trans community has hijacked the gay community's political agenda, which has been relatively peaceful. I mean, they're in support of things I'm certainly not in support of, but the trans community is now kind of in a political war with the gay community, and the gay community is upset about that. But so here you got Canada telling people in your country, beware of the United States government, but they're not telling the people in the country to beware of the killers and murderers of gay people in the Middle East. They're not telling your country men and women to beware of the killers and murderers who are living in communist China, but they're telling your countrymen and women to beware of the United States. Does that make sense?
No. Again, it's so typical of the radical left to demonize anyone who doesn't agree with absolutely everything that they say. If a man so much as utters a statement that the radical left doesn't agree with, then they don't just argue with that man. Like you mentioned, they turn it into a scandal. I return to Christ. So here's Christ talking about things which the Pharisees agree with, and they were vehemently opposed to. It wasn't like they had arguments with Christ. First, they tried to trap him, right, with questions, disingenuous questions they didn't really mean, they didn't really care for, but they did it anyway to try and trip him up. When that didn't work, then they became increasingly aggressive in their tactics. They tried to silence Christ, they threatened Christ, they did this, that, and the other thing to try and make him stop speaking. And then eventually, of course, they took him to the cross. And so in the same way, you have these individuals in government who are blatantly opposed to law or blatantly opposed to certain ideologies and certain values, and they refuse to countenance them. They refuse to exercise all of that tolerance that they claim to have, and instead condemn those who don't agree with their views to, if you read between the lines of this press release, to basically criminals. It's a typical tactic because those individuals in government, those radicals, don't have the intellectual capacity to argue their point rationally. Also, because their point isn't rational, it can't be argued rationally. And so they have to revert to a sort of pseudo force. Instead of arguing, they just say it's dangerous, it's bad, you can't go there, they're criminals, or they're oppressive, they're this, that, and the other thing. And they give no valid reason or argument for their statement, but they put it out anyway.
Although the Canadian foreign affairs minister, refuses to reveal the famous game plan, I'm going to reveal to them tonight on this broadcast what our game plan is. What do you think of that, Tanner? You think that's fair? They won't tell us. We have no secrets, although they do. And the reason why they are not revealing the game plan, folks, is they have no idea what they said or what they're going to do. They did make a huge mistake, a real bad mistake. You don't politically attack your ally just south of you, the most powerful country in the world. You don't do that. You don't attack American conservatives who full-heartedly support the Canadian people in their fight for freedom and liberty and individual rights. And Tanner, before I show what the response is going to be, you said something before about, the world, and there's one big mass of land. What the Canadian government, in my view, and the United States government under Biden never expected was for Canada and the United States, the people, to join together like at no other time in history to defeat these tyrannical powers. They never expected it. They never saw it coming, but they ain't seen nothing yet.
Yes, you're right. They didn't expect the pushback that they received. The Canadian convoy was one of the most magnanimous demonstrations of freedom in Western history, and it as a consequence, it generated this magnificent movement for freedom and against what these elite individuals are trying to do. I think you're exactly correct. It's a fantastic time to be involved in something like this. I'm so excited for the future, and especially knowing what you told me about what your next move is. I'm so excited to see what happens.
Well, this is going to be good, all right? Because like I said, they handed us a gift. So here's what we're going to do, folks. September, I think around September 12th or something, our United States Congress is coming back from vacation. Actually, they're on vacation all year, so I don't know why they say they're on vacation. But anyway, they're coming back, and we have a full plate here in the United States. We got some real serious things we're dealing with. But I made a commitment to the Canadian people that we're not going to forget you, and we will not forget you. So here's what we're going to do. My answer to the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister and some of the operatives from Parliament Hill who may be watching, the answer is this. First, I want you to see something. Yeah, maybe about 20 letters. Well, the brothers and sisters of these letters, folks, I know you can't read it, it's inside out, are over there, and there's about 50,000 of them. And I'm not kidding. 50,000, close to 50,000 letters from Canadians and people from 8 or 9 different countries doing what? Well, it's simple. Let me read it here. SOS from Canada or whatever country they're from to the United States of America. Again, I know you're seeing that backwards, okay? My point is this. So 50,000 of these is part of the evidence that we are going to bring to the United States Congress, all right? Now, physically, at point one, we're not going to bring them all to Capitol Hill. We probably can't even get near there. But what I want to do is bring a load of these to the media. So that's the first step, right, Tanner? We're going to get them to the media, and I want them to physically see. In fact, folks, I want to show you something. Look, I'm going to show you something, folks. They're still sealed. All right, only a few we opened up. All right, and the reason why we didn't open them up is because we don't want anybody to accuse us of stuffing envelopes and faking them. That's why we asked you not to put a return address on there. We didn't need it. All right. What we have on your letters is postmarked from Canada. Well, look at this one, Tanner. They never even postmarked it. You got a Canadian stamp, and it's not even postmarked. So we got friends in the Canadian post office, for goodness sakes. They're sending them out. But we got them. All right. That's what we needed. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Right. So anyway, so here's what's going to happen. We're going to send a summary, which we're going to publicize, okay? A summary of events that we have evidence about, events that occurred in Canada, with the, in that the summary is going to be the fact that we have these letters, because, Tanner, nobody's going to believe that, right? They're going to say, well, yeah, guy's kidding. Who gets all those letters? Well, we did, from people who believe in freedom and liberty and individual rights. So what we're going to do is get all this information together. We're going to build a summary, and then we're going to do something that I don't think was ever done in the United States. I don't know if it can be done, but we're going to push it. After we prove, at least in our view, that the Canadian government is going so far to the left that it's bordering on a communist ideological government that is going to affect the national security of the United States of America. And the number one thing now, which wasn't 2 weeks ago, the number one piece of evidence is going to be what your foreign affairs minister said about the election interference, the so-called game plan, and then these travel advisories, and of course the Bill C-18. Those are going to be the top 3, and then we got a load of other stuff that we're not going to publicize because there is some sensitive stuff in there. Because I want the Congress, or just going to ask for them to look into it. But we're going to request that our Congress hold public hearings. Public hearings. And now, how will they do that? Well, we'll help them. We'll see if we could get Canadians that live in the United States, that are dual citizens, that will be protected by our Constitution. We don't want anybody to put their freedom and liberty in Canada in danger. We have enough Canadians, we believe, living here, Canadian citizens living here in the States who have dual citizenship. So we're going to let Congress know that the people that, if they're willing to come to testify, well, they need to be protected. Now, of course, I could testify over what we did and what we have, and we could get other people who have worked on this. But Tanner, I think it's best to have people who have written those letters or who have been affected dramatically, or family members, to be the ones testifying if it comes to that.
Yes, and I think it's a powerful demonstration of just how serious the situation in Canada is. Trudeau becomes more and more dictatorial every day. The man doesn't take one step back from his Orwellian desires. He continues to push, and he presses and he presses and he continues to press no matter what the polls are saying, no matter what people are saying. His appetite is, it's funny, the more he eats, the hungrier he gets. That is, the more power that he consumes, the more power he wants. And so he's descending deeper and deeper into this dark and lamentable abyss of power and control above all else. And so I think the sooner that this is brought to the attention of the American people, undoubtedly our greatest allies, the greatest allies in the world, the better. People need to know what's happening. People need to know what's going on. The best way to combat tyranny is to combat it before it exists. A tyranny is often not present until it's omnipresent. And so the sooner that the people of all Western nations and free nations around the world can comprehend just how vast this dangerous plan is, the better, because it increases the probability of them standing up and being doing so by a demonstrable degree the earlier they hear it.
Folks, we have posted news media stories on Facebook, and we've gotten feedback that the Canadians are not receiving it. So it's already happening. Now, Tanner, you said something to me a couple of weeks ago when I broached the subject that, gee, I wonder if they're going to really end up blocking us. But you said something really interesting, if you recall, but we're not a news outlet. So
right.
We may not come under that.
That's correct. So, for example, I can still see your broadcasts and I can see your pictures and I can see just your writings. But the people are correct. When you post a news story from a news organization, that I can't see. Instead, it says, as a result of current Canadian laws, this content can't be viewed on Facebook. So, like almost every other government bill, the rules are, or the actual writings in the bill are bland and imprecise at best. So nobody really knows what the law is. This certainly hasn't harmed Facebook, for example. A study just came out yesterday or 2 days ago showing that the Canadian usage of Facebook hasn't decreased, or if it has, it's decreased by the slightest margin. It could be attributed to a variety of other factors. So it hasn't hurt Facebook at all. All that this bill has done is hurt, massive mainstream news organizations. Fine. They weren't preaching the truth anyway, but it's severely harmed the alternative forms of media, the alternative news outlets, the smaller news outlets, the ones that are working their hardest to promote truth and expose Trudeau and other demagogues for the monsters that they are. Those companies, those groups have been harmed very greatly by this bill, and I believe that's precisely what Trudeau intended.
I'm so amazed at your news media, the CBC and other outlets that are funded by the government. It really proves, I gotta laugh about it. It exposes how they are enslaved to the government. I mean, they should be the first ones out front crying out loud. Hey, look, this is against freedom of speech. This is government control over what we can say and do as journalists. But these people get into the fetal position, when these tyrants, not only in your country, but here in the United States, that as soon as they open their mouth or even squeak, and so you're right, Tanner, it exposes a lot. And you said something else interesting about, being excited and an opportunity. Well, I was asked that question last night on this radio broadcast about all these issues. This host was telling me he was kind of down and depressed, as many people are, over what they see happening here in America. And how do you feel, Lieutenant? I said, I feel exuberated. I feel excited because this is an opportunity, Tanner. Think about this. And I've said it over and over again to the American people and the Canadian people and others fighting for freedom. Had the truckers' convoy didn't happen in Canada, had the moms and dads didn't happen going to school board meetings over what's happening here, we would never have been awakened to the monster that was coming at us in both countries. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. Oh, I completely agree with you. That convoy was a blessing in more ways than people comprehend or can comprehend. It's true that because of that protest and protests around the country and your country and so on, our rights and freedoms were returned to us, albeit far too slowly. They never should have been taken from us at all, but they were returned to us. But on top of that, as you mentioned, the purpose of that convoy was in part to expose the truth of the future or what these individuals were planning for the future. And this woke them up from their foolishness, and it woke Canadians up from their slumber. It's a deep slumber. You read the history of Canada in combat, in any sort of combat. Now, of course, this isn't combat in the classical sense, but we're still fighting for our rights and freedoms. At any rate, you read the history of Canada in combat, particularly in the First and Second World Wars, and we're compared to this sort of sleeping creature that you don't want to wake. We're not as large as America, of course, but when you read about the Canucks at Vimy, or when you read about the men taking Juno at D-Day or on D-Day, when you read about the heroes of the Canadians in war, you realize how the true Canadian, is a man who is remarkably meek, insofar as he's a man and a woman, or whoever it might be. He's a man who you want to be a friend with in times of peace, and he's a man who you want to fight beside in times of war. He exists both at once. I know many Americans are like that too. The greatest among you are those who are ruthless in times of con or called upon, but they're also at the same time your best friends in times of peace. And so with that convoy, we demonstrated that. For a long time, Canadians tolerated the laws, the lockdowns, too long probably, but we tolerated them nonetheless. And then one day we said enough, and a mighty protest was staged, and it was victorious, no matter what our government says. And it demonstrated that fighting spirit being not raised from the dead, because it never died, but it was demonstrated for the world to see, and that rubbed off on other nations, and it certainly was felt by other governments, and that momentum has only increased as time has gone by.
And you're winning. Winning.
Just like you, absolutely.
Speaking about us here in the United States, I know many of you in Canada and around the world don't receive the news of what's going on here. So I want to fill you in on some of the things. The American people have taken a lot of these government agencies, from school boards to the federal government, the court, with regard to a lot of their woke agenda, the critical race theory, the drag queens, and on and on and on and on. Well, I'm pleased to announce that over 85, maybe even 90% now of these cases have been judged in favor of the people, in violation of the Constitution of the United States. These people who took these individuals to court are moms, are dads looking to protect their children from all of this, the woke agenda, and this terrible, explicit sexual content that they're revealing to children at elementary school level. Well, the parents have won. We had a couple that refused to, based on religious freedom, who owned a bakery, who refused to build a wedding cake for a gay couple. They won in a court case. Separation of church and state, or freedom of beliefs, etc. My point is this: you do things within the framework of the law, you're going to win. Believe me, you're going to win. Now, speaking about winning, it's very important for people around the world to understand how our justice system works. A person is innocent until proven guilty, and the justice system may not be as quick as we would like it to be. There are people that will always question, should a person be charged? Should they be arrested? Well, things go to a grand jury. Prosecutor brings the case to a grand jury, and then a grand jury decides whether a person should be indicted or not, which leads me to Donald Trump. Now, Trump has been indicted with so many charges against him. It's unbelievable what we're seeing happening here. Do I believe that this is also a solution? No question about it. I really believe that. It's getting a little ridiculous, especially the timing of all this. But be that as it may, it is what it is. So we have an obligation now in the United States of America to let this run its course. I have enough confidence, at least at this point, I have enough confidence that when it gets to the United States Supreme Court, because Tanner, I believe that's where it's going to eventually end up, that the Supreme Court is going to rule on a lot of these indictments that will at least, to a great degree, bring some sort of closure to the American people. Because there are things there, folks, that as I begin to see who's flipping on who and who's turning government witnesses, it tells me they don't want to go to jail, and it tells me there's enough evidence there to send people to jail. So I've been in law enforcement long enough to understand that that's how it works. But here's something that I spoke to Tanner about earlier. And Tanner, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this too. This is something that I've been warning about that is absolutely dangerous to the degree that it could cost a whole lot of American lives. I mean, a lot of American lives. This is something that I went on the air, on the media outlet, and addressed it. And here's what was said at a Trump rally, a MAGA rally, folks, just a few weeks ago. And the media actually reported that speakers at a pro-Trump rally suggested that the Make America Great Again movement is at war with the rest of the country, saying God wants Americans to raise an army. Folks, on top of that, there has been talk in this country, insane talk about the possibility of a civil war. Well, when a person of influence, when a person in politics, when speakers at a rally use those words, that God's raising up an army, when they use the words, well, it's leading to a civil war, in the minds of certain people that are completely out of their minds, that could trigger something disastrous. So I told the press that it is incumbent, and I also know who's also watching, my own party members, Republican National Committee people, maybe, many people involved in the Republican Party who are in politics. You have a responsibility, like I do, to lower the temperature and to condemn such talk. We have a Constitution. We are the party of the Constitution of the United States of America to prevent a civil war after the first one we had. And the first one, Tanner, I said, who needs to come out and condemn this, I mean, categorically, is Donald Trump.
Right, sure. You know, I like what you mentioned at the start, which is we have a law and we know the steps to operate within the law. And because the law is truth, law as it's supposed to be, because the law is truth itself, it cannot be denied. You can stall it for a year, as you mentioned, might take a while. You can even stall it for a few years. You can stall it for a bit, right? But as the resurrection of Christ demonstrates and proves, you can't kill it. You can't even kill it. You can't put it to death. If you do, it'll simply rise from the dead and it'll live once again. So the most effective way in that regard of fighting is by doing so within the framework of the law, and not when you do so, if you do so, right, you avoid becoming that thing which you swore to fight against. We have all of these actors and demagogues who are working outside of the framework of law. They're working outside of the framework of justice and goodness and righteousness and all of these things to achieve their aims. And from the outside, right now, it can look like it's effective, right? It might look like they're achieving their ideals quickly in comparison to others. They're doing so what seems to be efficiently, right? One day we're free, the next day we wake up and we're all locked down. What they don't realize, and I think what we often, as we ourselves, don't realize, is that by doing so, by those individuals operating outside the framework of law, they actually end up destroying themselves. Now, they might do so slowly, but they're destroying themselves all the same. Because as a human being, part of my function, the reason I am a human, or part of what it means to be human, is to operate within the law. That's what it is to act like a human. The 10 Commandments, for example, I shall not lie, I shall not steal, I shall not covet, etc., are blueprints for humanity. To operate within those bounds of law is to operate as humans are supposed to act. That's the way we're supposed to operate. It's what separates us from the animal kingdom. And so with something like this, with something as serious as this, as the state of the political situation in your country and in mine, we still, as human beings who serve righteousness and truth, have an obligation to operate within the framework of the law. Doing so guarantees that we keep our humanity. And that's a great victory in itself, as far as I'm concerned, when you realize that the position and the objective of the radical left is to strip us of our humanity. That's a main goal, a main objective, a main purpose of everything that they're doing. And so in and of itself, just to say, no, I am going to operate within the framework of the law because I am a human being, is a victory to start with itself, and it guarantees victory in the future.
Tanner, I would venture to say that most of these people calling for violence, calling for civil wars, calling for all this terrible, terrible fighting between Americans here, okay? I would venture to say that they were never on a real, true field of combat. They were never in a war. They never had been involved in gunfights. Well, I have, as a police officer. And I've got to tell you, folks, I've seen people die. I've seen people shot. I've seen people injured as a result of violence very, very badly. And you don't want to go down that road. You don't want Americans fighting Americans. Who we should be fighting are communists. And I'm not talking about warfare on our land. I'm talking about you fight them politically right now. And if it ever comes to a war with communist China, well, then we do what we got to do to blow them off the face of the earth. But you don't have Americans fighting Americans. And in Canada, I would suggest the same thing. If anybody in the free world is beginning to hear people advocate the picking up of arms to kill other citizens, you've got to stay away from them. Just stay away from them because they're crazy. You don't do that. Sure, Tanner, we'll get people say, well, you guys in America in 1776, you did that, but we fought a foreign power. And what happened years later, Tanner? We had a civil war and it killed thousands and thousands of Americans. It didn't make any sense.
And you must also remember the consequences of a media which is opposed to the march, the movement for truth. They'll take anything and everything they can to demonize and discourage the movement and paint it in a picture which is desperately harming to individuals who just want freedom. And so it's you must be careful in what you say, what you speak, what you mean, what you act, or how you act, what you do, and so on, because this is a battle. And of course, the enemy won't play fairly, and he won't grant any mistakes or mulligans. Instead, he'll take absolutely every advantage that he can to try and completely destroy what we're trying to build.
Let's use that truckers convoy as an example. And I get excited over the videos we saw because we will get them to our Congress. The people were peaceful. The truckers were peaceful. We don't have one video of a citizen getting completely violent where it would cause the onslaught of the police the way they use excessive force. We saw the complete opposite. And therein lies what you just said, the victory. The victory is of the people, by the people, and for the people. When we saw police officers storm Pastor Arthur's church when he was behind the pulpit, I mean, shocking. I mean, I'm believing that when our congressional representatives, if they ever have these hearings and see that, they're going to think about Nazi Germany, for goodness sakes. You don't do that. You don't storm a guy's pulpit in the middle of a sermon. And then later on, I understand they surrounded the guy's car with his family in it. And I mean, who does those things? And then you got a police chief saying, we're coming to get you. We know who you are. We're coming to find you, whatever he said. The government of the United States of America under Biden is the same way, folks. The IRS, the FBI, the Department of Justice, all of this replicates what's happened in your country. But the people of America really wised up. They really wised up because they're going to these board meetings on school district level and they're fighting for their children and they're winning. And here's how they won. To your point again, they went peacefully. They went and read exactly what they approved, the school board members. And what does Biden do? He unleashes the FBI, who calls mommy and daddy a terrorist. All right. I mean, you talk about giving a gift. All right. And when that came out, folks, it infuriated Americans not to go out and commit acts of violence, but to build the masses. And instead of 20 people going to a board meeting, you've got 200. And maybe you've got 1,000. Maybe you've got 1,500, but all peacefully within the framework of the law. I think that's pretty important that we sound the alarm and say, calm down, folks. And I'll tell you, Tanner, you couldn't have said it any better. We have a God above. I think he would want us to do things that would not embarrass us, would not take the narrative to fight for freedom and liberty away, and also a testimony to our faith.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First and foremost, as a Christian, I and you are ambassadors for Christ. When people see us, they're supposed to see Christ, not because we're high and mighty, but because Christ lives through us. And so we as individuals have to be so conscious of every single action that we take, realizing and recognizing that people are watching us. The media is watching us. Like you mentioned, perhaps politicians are watching us. The individual across the street is watching us. The child playing at the playground as we walk past, who knows where, on a walk is watching us. Everyone's watching us. And so we have, again, a very high calling, and it's a very heavy calling, but it's a high one, to emulate Christ in all that he does and act as we're supposed to act. And the only way to know how to do that is to read the scriptures first and foremost. The scriptures themselves say that the word of the Almighty is the sword, is this sharp double-edged sword which goes forth into battle. That's in Ephesians 6:14-17. And using that, then the individual using that truth itself, which is revealed in the scripture, can go to school board meetings, can go to city council meetings, can go to political rallies or political debates and discussions, can go to this place and that in peace, but also with courage and bravery to speak about what's true and to prove this radically progressive, dangerous, leftist movement to be the well, actually, the word is demonic, the demonic movement that it is. That's how you do it. And then, of course, as more and more people hear and understand and listen to what's being said, that will only continue to increase number and size. And eventually those who wish to destroy our way of life will be overwhelmed.
Think about this, my fellow patriots in America. Think about having a civil war, and you know who's going to show up? Communist China. And they're going to take advantage of that moment to destroy us. And that is my greatest concern, if anything like that happened. But I do believe that the American people are smart. I believe that they're waking up, that violence does not solve our problems. It only makes them worse. Now, that doesn't mean, folks, we lay down like doormats and get stepped on. We fight, and we fight back within the framework of the law. And at times, some of our leaders have to make things very clear to the bad guys, as did Governor DeSantis of Florida did this week. I don't know if, Tanner, you heard about, I'm sure you know about the hurricane. Did you hear the governor's response to the looters of the houses in Florida?
Yes, and he had a memorable quote, but I can't remember what it is. But is it if you loot, we shoot? Is that what the quote is?
You loot, we shoot.
Yeah.
And I'm all for it. You see, yes, I'm all for it.
It is. Like, government has a responsibility to uphold the big laws. That's what government is there to do. Thou shalt not steal. If you assault a woman, you should be, pursued by the government and charged. If you harm an individual in a wicked way, you should be pursued and charged, etc. The purpose of the government is to uphold the big laws. That's what they're supposed to do. But instead, our government, and your presidential government as well, they're more concerned with the small laws, right? Trudeau is more concerned about a plastic straw than he is about a narcotic, right? Welcome to my country here in Canada, where narcotics are legal and you can inject yourself with just awful, horrendous drugs at any time that you please, even unto death, but you can't drink from a plastic straw because apparently that's dangerous. Like, that's the sort of nonsensical, upside down, backwards thinking that our governments in the West are currently engaged in, and it's leading to our harm, because what's right isn't being upheld as what's right. So for DeSantis to say, if you want to commit a crime, if you want to trespass on private property and take advantage of people, in any time, let alone right now when devastation has hit the state, good luck to you. Good for DeSantis. He's absolutely right to say so. That's the purpose of government.
And they're enforcing the Second Amendment. He made that clear. Every single resident in Florida can now own a weapon. They can own a weapon, and they could use that weapon in defense of their property and their lives. There's something called the Stand Your Ground law in Florida. If you believe someone is coming and they're going to harm you, they're going to enter your property and do something to you, you could shoot them. And that's what he articulated. As long as it was within the framework of the law. He didn't suggest go out and chase somebody down the street and shoot them. But if they're breaking into your house or if they're looting your property, you have every right to do that. So I'm interested to see how many homes are going to be looted now, or how many bodies of bad guys are going to be floating in the water of that hurricane. Because as far as I'm concerned, you got to be tough on these criminals. They are terrorists. And to me, as I said on a news media station the other night, the real criminals are the political people sitting in office that are allowing these criminals to roam our streets. Speaking of crime, all right, Trudeau is running around the world telling us that Canada is very safe, that, again, he's throwing it in our face. America is so violent, and we've never denied that. But he said we're safe. We can walk the streets in Canada. But I'm getting these news feeds, and so you're from Canada, and I'm looking at the chat room here, folks, if you could weigh in on this. And I don't know, could you see the chat room, Tanner? Could you see that?
I can see a chat, actually. I can, yes.
Oh, good. So I have a question. to our listeners in Canada. Are you getting the news about all the violence in Canada? Are you getting the news we're getting about the shootings, the stabbings that are going on, especially in Toronto? We're getting a lot of that now. Is you getting that news out there? At least Tanner, I know you can speak for yourself, but I'm curious about the people in Canada.
Yeah, we're getting the news, certainly, even from personal experience. The other day I went to Calgary, which is rated one of the prettiest cities in North America. And it is a beautiful city. It's a gorgeous city. It's about 1.5 million, it's 1.5 million, 1.3 million, whatever it is. It's got a gorgeous skyline, and it has the Rocky Mountains on the west side of the city. It's this stunning, stunning landscape. Anyways, the other day I said, I'll take a trip downtown just because it was a nice summer day, but summer's coming to a close. And so I thought it appropriate to window shop and just have a Saturday in downtown Calgary. Well, I parked and I walked around a place called Beltline, a section of downtown called Beltline. And when I got out of my vehicle, it took me all of 15 seconds to realize I was in the wrong place. Even though the city of Calgary online describes Beltline and other areas of downtown as being family friendly, community friendly, et cetera, et cetera. As I'm walking around, I see individuals who are high out of their minds. It's dangerous. It's turned into a slum. I couldn't walk through the park in Beltline because taken by addicts who were using drugs in the middle of the day at 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning. There were a few police officers walking around or security guards walking around, but the downtown had completely transformed from even just a few years ago because of, in large part, like you mentioned, the refusal of government to recognize and tackle crime for what it is. And so I can speak from personal experience. Things are changing, especially in our downtown centers in major cities. They're turning into these dangerous slums. I know Edmonton, which is our capital here in Alberta, is exactly the same. The dangerous population downtown there is very bad. It's very bad. People are moving away from downtown for fears of insecurity, and it's spreading across the nation. This is what happens again when a government targets innocence and cares more about plastic straws and paper straws than they do actual legitimate laws, which matter and which the Almighty commands government to institute.
Tanner, I'm trying to recall a video that I saw, and I'm not going to say it was in Canada because I believe it was, but I'm not sure. I should have actually collected it, of a stabbing in front of a store where a person, they actually was videotaping this, and a person was stabbed to death in front of a store cafe. Did you hear anything about that one?
I haven't, but again, it wouldn't surprise me. I know friends who have talked about watching or seeing stabbings happen outside of the library, the public library, again in Calgary. I've heard of a lot of assaults and dangerous activity, again, happening in downtown cities. It's becoming exceedingly dangerous, and it's so wrong.
Now, folks, this is a news report. We just got this a few days, actually on August 8th. Major crime is up in 2023 by more than 20% in Canada compared to the same time last year in 2022. There's a little note here that your prime minister says that the Trudeau government thinks rising crime is all in your head. Well, I don't think it's in the head of people who are being victimized by crime. Now, Tanner, so the Trudeau government says it's in your head, but then they come out and say that, to reduce some of the rising crime rates, we need more social services. Well, we tried that in America, and those involved in social services didn't solve the problem. I'm bringing this up, folks, because the prime minister there is trying to paint a very, very bad picture of America being a place you don't want to come to. Look, I love my country, and I'll be the first to admit we have violence in this country unprecedented as a result of the individual we have in the White House and the Democrats running the country. But as I said, patience, folks, patience. We now have elections coming up across some of the states with regard to the state assemblies and senates. And Tanner, I'm pleased to tell you that Democrats are now singing the tune of the Republican platform because they are now being victimized by crimes that they allow to happen as a result of their legislation, and they see they're going to be out of work. And the same thing I would say, hopefully the Canadian people will realize that, again, no violence, use your fingers, your heads, your hearts, go vote for people who are going to support the people. All right. Vote for candidates who are going to support the people. That's how you do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let freedom ring and use the powers granted to you through the democratic system to voice your opinion. And as politicians, they'll follow. I often, the way that government is set up right now, or the way that they act, is comparable to parents. It's almost like they're acting as if they're our parents. But the opposite is true. We're the parents of government. Government isn't the parent of us, right? The purpose of government isn't to discipline innocents. It's for the innocent individuals to discipline government when they do bad things or when they make bad policy. And in the same way, right, when you have increasing crime, when you have less safety on streets, when taxes are high, et cetera, then the people have to let their government know that that was the wrong decision to make.
Well, Tanner, we've run out of time, and we got to wait another month before we come on, huh?
Oh,
Another month, but a lot happens in a month.
yes.
Tanner, what I'd like to do, let me just get here, and you have your broadcast, right? You have your own broadcast. If you could share with the audience when you are on, okay?
Yeah.
While I get this, you go right ahead.
Sure. So I have on my website, which I think there it is on the screen. It's just myname.com. I have exclusive content now. So I have videos, I have articles, et cetera, that can only be accessed through subscribing. So if any of your audience members are interested in reading my comments or analysis on current events of the day, or watching videos that are longer than 3 minutes and are instead, more like 10 or 15 minutes, whatever is needed, those are on my website. And so anyone, if they want in your audience, can subscribe for a month at a time or for a year, and all of that content is unlocked. So something if they'd like to consider.
That's great. And what's neat about it, it's most of it's Canadian content within the framework of C18.
Absolutely.
They may not like what's on there, but it's Canadian content.
Yes,
boy, are they
right.
stupid or what, huh? Are they really that dumb? I had a friend that once said to me, some people are so dumb they don't know how dumb they are. And that there's so much truth to that too. Our elected officials, but good, you're working within C18. Boy, I love to hear that.
Yes.
We may not last long, but you should be lasting for a long time there.
We'll see. We'll do our best, one day at a time.
But there's his website, folks. Go to it, help him out, give him, get a subscription. Hey, can I get a subscription? Could people in America get a subscription?
Oh, yeah, anyone can. It's worldwide.
Oh, man, this is great. All right, folks, so that's it. Now, we're going to see you every last Thursday of each month, all right? And I'll be coming on from time to time with updates. Tune in to Tanner. Tanner, when's your broadcast?
You know what? It actually depends on the news. So if the news is raging and roaring, then I'm on, multiple times a day. If instead it's quiet, then I'll shift my focus for the day or two somewhere else. So it's actually it's anytime and all the time.
Hey, we got enough raging and roaring news coming out of DC in the near future. You'll be on 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So look, we have a lot of fun on the broadcast. Look, we're not making light of the seriousness of this, but sometimes you got to sit back and say, you know what? Things are not as bad as they look, right, Tanner? The best days are ahead for the United States. The best days are ahead for Canada. Why?
Yeah.
Because we're going to determine our own destiny, not some politicians, right, Tanner?
Absolutely. Christ has already won. Absolutely. That's the hope.
So we're going to close out. You don't know how we're going to close out, Tanner, but we're going to be a team right now. There were words that you said before that started with the word let. So I want to close out with that.
That started with the word let. Now I'm trying to remember what they were.
Right. Started with the words
let. Yes, let freedom, that one.
Okay, so what was the whole term?
The whole term was let freedom ring. Oh, you got a bell. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Tanner, thanks so much. See you next month, folks. And look for us from time to time. God bless you. God bless Canada. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Have a good one, Tanner. Thank you.
Bye, you too.
Bye-bye.